Do you play your scales every day? Are you supposed to play your scales every day? Why do we do them in the first place? How do they benefit us as flutists and as musicians? We're going to talk about scales and all of that stuff today. And my very controversial take that maybe we don't need to be just playing them every single day. We'll get to that in a minute. But welcome back to the Flute Fundamentals series. If you haven't checked out the first 4 episodes, I'll link the last one in the description. It was all about flute technique, which really does come in handy when we're talking about scales. So if you want to see that for reference, it's all about finger movement, finger transitions, and how to set yourself up fundamentally so that you will have the easiest time possible. So why do we play scales? First of all, they are the absolute fundamental of our vocabulary. All of our music, most of our music, especially in Western cultures, revolve around major and minor scales most of the time, and some modes as well. But generally speaking, if you're going to play something, it's usually in a major or minor key. As musicians, it is so important to learn the vocabulary of scales. This is because this is how we really do speak the language of music. I think that a lot of times we are told this by teachers saying we need to learn scales in our warm-ups and our exercises so that we can play the pieces. And yes, you will be able to play pieces and just with a fingering chart and figure it out, but scales are a way to sort of shortcut all of the pain of just learning everything from scratch every single time, because most of the things that we play have passages that are scalar or involve scales, and arpeggios and all of the other technical exercises that no doubt your flute teacher has assigned you. By the way, if you are looking for a flute teacher online, I am currently taking students for my fall studio. If you're interested, you can check out an inquiry form in the description. But what is the language of music? It's a form of communication, right? We have major modes, minor modes. All of these evoke emotions. They mean things to different people, just like words kind of have different connotations to different people. But it's a lot more artistic and free than that, especially the more advanced you get at your instrument. When we want to speak the language of music, what that entails is, how do we speak through our instrument? How do we change notes? How do we do that in a way that's really artful and conducive to whatever the mood of the piece that we are portraying is? It really is all about creating vibes, after all, and scales and keys are absolutely part of that, key signatures. Learning the language of music means seeing it on a page, being able to translate that to your instrument, and then produce it. That is a skill. And we make that skill a lot easier once we learn our scales. So that is why we learn them as musicians, but why do we learn them as flutists? Scales function differently for every musician. A pianist, for example, the scales are going to be serving a different function. Maybe spatially, they learn where the key centers are. A violinist will have to practice the intervals spatially on their fingerboard because there's no frets like on a guitar. This is really to get fluent in each scale. For violinists, their pitch is determined by their finger placement. So a lot of string players will warm up with slow scales. For us, maybe that would be more of an embouchure exercise, and pitch might not be the focus. For us, I think scales are really for our fingers and the balance of our instrument to learn where it needs to be in order to play a scale successfully. For example, I would not play an F major scale and feel the same way in my hands and my fingers and my setup as I would in an F sharp major scale. One has, for example, the thumb B flat, and the other one has an F sharp. Right? We have all of these different notes, and we'll say different words or different letters, right? That's kind of how I think about it. It's a completely different feeling each scale that we play, so we want to get familiar with the finger combinations, speed and evenness and changes as we go along within our scales. That is why I think scales are really important. Finger connectivity, note connectivity, and doing that enough times where it feels like second nature to play scalar passages evenly, technically sound, and cleanly. So if you're just starting out with scales, a great place to start is the circle of fifths and learning how all of the scales fit together, how they're related, and all of those things. It will make everything make a lot more sense. And if you want me to do a video on that, please let me know below and I am happy to explain that further. If you are starting from the ground up, I would make sure to go slowly. Scales are not something that we just do them to do them. If you are not actively and intentionally becoming aware of your body, how your fingers are moving and all of that, it doesn't really make sense to do them. And this is what I mean by I don't think we necessarily need to be doing our scales every day. If you don't have the intention of paying attention and of really working on the details of scales, I don't know exactly the benefit of doing them other than you need to warm up and you can use them as a warm up. But if you want to practice your scales every day, what that means to me is I'm listening for each note connecting to the next. How is the sound from one note to the next? How is the finger change from one note to the next? How hesitant did it feel? Did I feel hesitation? Did it feel smooth and easy? And can I repeat it? Do I feel comfortable? Those are all the things I'm considering. And it could be that maybe you need to take a magnifying glass and zoom in on 2 notes at a time. We underestimate the value of doing 2 to 3 notes at a time. Why? Because you will have those combinations come up again. If you can't play, let's say, in the 3rd octave or the high octave very effortlessly, then doing 2 notes at a time is actually so beneficial. The finger combinations up there are really difficult, and when we are able to wrap our brain around them at a slow tempo, we're so much more likely to be successful in our endeavors in the high register later on. Scales are not for playing fast. I think a lot of times we think that if we do our scales, the faster the better. I don't think so. I think we should play scales because we want to have a controlled feeling with the instrument. We want to figure out the balance, how each scale feels to play, and how we can do that at any speed, any dynamic, and any range. So if you've learned your scales and maybe haven't gotten them quite up to any speed, any dynamic, any range, this is when I usually prescribe an exercise or book like Taffanel and Gobert's 17 Daily Exercises. This book was designed to help you iron out all of these really difficult finger combinations. It's like our flute Bible. Now, if you are playing these exercises, you have to know why you're doing them. Maybe you're trying to get your fingers to go quicker in a major scale, right? Or major scales in general. Something like this could be really helpful. Number 1. Now, at the top of that exercise, there are different articulation markings. And sometimes we can try to bite off a little bit more than we can chew. So what I would recommend, if you're thinking about finger connectivity, don't even worry about the articulation yet. What you want to do is hear your finger changes most accurately, and that is done without the tongue articulating. Once again, this is why it's so important to know why you're doing your scales. If you're trying to do them for evenness, I really like to number all of the notes. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So in each one of those, I'm thinking 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And I'm always thinking about my air. I'm thinking about how my air has to flow through those notes. I'm thinking about that with my fingers, and I'm also expecting each and every note to come out exactly rhythmically. I would do your scales with the metronome. This is something that we don't always do, and if you're working slowly, maybe 2 or 3 notes at a time, you can leave the metronome aside for the moment, but once you get a hang of the scales, I really think that evenness is something that is trained into our body. Our body learns this language. Our fingers, our air, our mouth shape, they all learn this language of playing a scale at any dynamic and any register. That's what we're really facilitating. We're not doing it as an intellectual exercise. We're doing it so our body knows. Now, a big part of our body knowing our scales is knowing what to expect in our ear. So a major scale, let's take C major for example, we have 2 whole steps, 1 half step, and then whole, 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 half. This is the same on a piano. If you play from C to C on the piano, you'll see that there are a whole, whole, half step because there's no black key in between E and F, whole, 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 and then there's no black key between B and C, and then half step. That is a major scale. There's no sharps, no flats. They're all white keys. Looking at a piano can be a really great resource when learning your scales because it'll just make a lot more sense with all of the half steps and whole steps. Now, your ears are something that I think are left out of the equation quite a bit. I think that every person learning their scales should learn the pattern of how each scale sounds. Whether I'm playing C major, F major, E flat major, F sharp major, any scale, they all sound about the same because the interval patterns are the same. What we want to do is get that pattern learned in our ear so we know what to expect. And the more that you actively listen and predict what it's going to sound like for the next note to come out, the better. Then you can really learn not only with the music in front of you, but without it in front of you. I think learning fundamental things from memory is actually a really great approach in addition to looking at scales on a piece of paper. The reason being, we are not using our ears all the time as classical musicians especially. We are looking at the page. But so often we don't feel the trust to rely on our ear and then to play the note on our flute. Very rarely, I think, that we can really rely on ourselves to do that. And I think building up that muscle is extremely valuable, and just be okay with making a few errors as you do this. So learning scales by ear can be actually such an amazing practice because then you get to know how they feel. Right? So if I'm learning a scale by ear and I don't have the page in front of me, I'm figuring out how it sounds and how I know it's supposed to sound, and then I'm figuring it out that way. That's just one other way to learn, and I think we underutilize it a lot. Once again, the more your fingers can trust your ear, the more your body works in harmony with itself to produce the sound and pitches that you want to on your instrument. So we sort of talked about beginners, just starting out with scales, really go slowly. Intermediate players as well. If you're working it up for speed, you're working up for comfortability, really being fluent in the language of music, of scales, of this tonality. But advanced players, do we do scales? Why would we do scales? How do we use scales as advanced players if we've done them for decades? I think they're an amazing vehicle to practice other techniques. For example, if I want to practice my double tonguing, I can use a Taffanel and Gobert scale pattern. Right? That's always an option. If I want to practice endurance, the way I warm up is breath attacks on Taffanel and Gobert number 4. This helps with endurance and keeping the air flowing. That will tire you out after a while. So, scale patterns become our way of practicing different articulation patterns, different finger combinations, different dynamic exercises. All of those things are wrapped up in scales and knowing the language physically of the music. Now, how often you play your scales is really up to you. I think that if you want to get really familiar and you need sort of like a refresher of all your scales, maybe doing 1 to 2 per week. And when I mean like 1 to 2 per week, like just cut off all other scales. You're only focusing on 1 or 2. Maybe they're closely related scales, so they have similar key signatures. C and G, for example, or C and F, because F has 1 flat, G has 1 sharp, C has no flats, no sharps, something like that to get yourself familiar with the language again. Then add on from there. I think that when you're picking up the instrument again after a long time, it's really easy to think, oh, this will just come back muscle memory. Well, your body is a little bit different. It's not in the habit of playing your instrument. You know, some things may have changed if it's been years. And I know that that can be really frustrating, but being willing to learn all of these scales even more evenly now that you're coming back to it, or you're revisiting scales or scale patterns, it can be a little bit humbling, to be honest, but it's definitely worth your time to go in and zoom in, maybe doing 2 notes at a time, 3 notes at a time, if you can't get the notes to come out in a way that you want, clearly, evenly, etc. So you might have heard of chunking, which is like a bar of music at a time, or maybe half a bar. What I would say is that a student of mine said this the other day, that you should use, it should be called crumbing. It's like 1 or 2 notes at a time, 2 to 3 notes at a time even, making sure that your hands feel comfortable and there's no hesitation. This is the secret that I think to learning fundamentals that we really need to invest in. How does your body feel playing this stuff? If you're getting things right, but feeling really hesitant and shaky in your body, you're not done, right? So a lot of times we think, oh, I need to do my scales, check. I need to do this perfectly 10 times, check. It's not about checking boxes, it's about checking in with yourself. When you don't check in with yourself, you're not practicing for yourself. You're practicing to achieve some sort of like arbitrary number, like perfection plan. When you check in with yourself, you're able to see, oh, I am hesitant here. I do want to do this a few more times. And it's not a shame thing, like you couldn't do it in 10 tries. Sometimes it takes 100 tries. I know the other day I spent half an hour on 2 beats of a measure because I know that that's what I needed to feel comfortable. I slowed it down. I did 2 notes at a time really fast. I did it slower and I did the full 2 beats. There are some passages that just don't stick in your brain very well, and sometimes it needs a bit more depth and a bit more work. And scales is absolutely the thing to invest in if that is what you're doing, because these finger combinations will show up everywhere. Now, if you want links to a few more scale books, I also have those in the description below. And if you have any questions, please comment below, and I am so excited to answer them. But in the meantime, if you haven't checked out the first few episodes of the Fundamental series, check those out here, and I will see you next time.